A Nandroid's Dream, Chapter 6. The week progressed and she continued her new daily routines, skipping chores and working on her origami figures, taking walks and coming home to laze around in her owner's bed. She was truly a different Nandroid than she had been just barely a week ago. Things weren't getting any easier or better for her, but she just couldn't help herself. This week had been filled with more of her dark little plans. The sink was now practically overflowing as she no longer did the dishes, hoping her owner would once again help her get them done. She had stolen another document from her owner's bag, but had never received a call, so the form apparently wasn't too important. She'd even begun to wear their clothes around the house during the day. They, of course, didn't fit and were enormous on her, but it was like they were there with her when she put on their shirt or wrapped up in their pajamas. Things had now culminated into her paying her owner a visit one day, without their prior knowledge. She thought back to how they always complimented her for being helpful or said they wished she was there to help at their job. Just go see them. They said they wish you were there. That was all the convincing she needed. One morning, almost immediately after they had left for work, she went to the bus stop and took the many routes to arrive at their job. The secretary was cheerful and let her through, though there was a hint of suspicion from them. No matter. What they thought didn't matter to her at all, and she went to her owner's office with her head held high. It was unfortunately a short trip, as they were wholly surprised to see her and suggested she head home before too long as it was a busy day for them. Even with offering to stay and help, they still told her no and sent her on her way. So she left without an external fuss, but on the way home had already started making plans to try again a different day, once she knew more about her owner's schedule. Certainly there would be a better day that she could show up and be useful to them. And now it was Friday night again. Dinner had been made and eaten, her owner had indulged themselves with a movie rental, and the pair were cozy on the couch. She had started trying to pay more attention to what was playing on TV during these times, but this one about some action hero saving the day did little for her interest. But snuggling up to her owner was another story entirely. All the explosions and death screams in the world couldn't do anything to draw her attention away from them. And this movie ran extra late. Perfect. So much extra time just to themselves. Or herself, at least. Her owner seemed to really like the movie and was fully invested. They sat and watched until the end, it now being much later than usual, and the moment it was over, her owner popping up and stretched, finally able to get feeling back in their arm which she had been clinging onto. Some swift good nights, with the promise of a late morning start for their walk and store trip, saw her owner off to bed, and left her lonely on the couch once again. They just left, but already she was sad. She just wanted to be with them all night. Every day the same idea pestered her. You should go check on them tonight. What an idea. She so badly wanted to see them sleeping, to be near them. She could do it tonight. Just a little bit longer and they'd be fast asleep. She'd never known them to wake up in the middle of the night, so who would it bother if she popped in for a peek? Certainly not her owner. She could feel her excitement build at this idea, and she stayed laying on the couch, counting the minutes. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes passed. Then it had finally been an hour. Certainly her owner was deep asleep now. She got up and turned all the lights off in the house and went to her owner's room. She laid her electronic ear against the door. Nothing. Total silence. With slow, controlled movements, completely at odds with her nervous mind, she grasped the handle to the room and slowly turned, opening the door a fraction of an inch. Still silent. A little further and her eyes cast a faint blue into the room. She hadn't thought about her eyes and the light they cast, but her owner was out cold, so it was probably fine. Probably. She slipped into the room and took dainty, silent steps to her owner's bed before kneeling down by their pillow. Their face was illuminated by her eyes, but it was so dim they were completely unbothered by it. So this is what they looked like sleeping, how funny! A wide smile appeared on her face as she took in every detail. The uneven eyebrows as their face was smushed against their pillow, their mouth slightly agape, and their disheveled hair all in a mess. What wonderful sights to behold! She leaned as close as she dared, feeling their soft breath against her skin and seeing it fog her eyes with each exhale. She was memorizing every inch of their face in this unique and lovely way, completely blind to everything around her. Until their eyes met. Her owner was looking directly at her, like a deer in headlights. It felt like she stopped processing. Everything froze inside of her with a painful halt, but only for a second before time resumed and her owner jerked back. "What?" They half mumbled, half yelled, squinting their eyes and placing a hand over their face, blocking the light. Her mind clicked away slowly, fear and nerves making it hard to process what to do or say. What? They spat, clearly not happy about this rude awakening. She couldn't think of anything. She couldn't remember what she had thought up as an excuse in case she was caught. She wanted nothing more than to run away right now and find a hole to shut off in. She let out a few non-committal syllables but couldn't bring herself to make a sentence. They were starting to come around now and sat up in bed, reaching for their bedside lamp. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" They sounded worried for her, and this jump started a response. She just couldn't let them fear for her. Yes, I'm fine. I just had to tell you that the stove is broken." She had no clue why that was the reason she gave, but she had to gain some kind of control over this embarrassing situation. The two just stared at each other after she provided this bit of information. Her owner slowly closed their eyes and laid face down in the pillow before letting out a long, raspy sigh, and mumbled something that sounded like an angry request to go back to bed. Without a second's hesitation, she stood and left the room, not saying as much as a goodbye and closing the door with a decisive click before returning to her own room and locking herself in. She didn't even turn the light on, but just stood at the door, trying her best not to scream. What a stupid robot she'd been. How could she have done such a thing? And now her owner was angry with her and expecting a broken stove of some kind? What would they think in the morning when they went into the kitchen and found everything completely normal? Certainly her behavior would warrant investigation, telling such a stupid lie in such a strange situation. Don't let them find out it was a lie. How? The stove was working fine and she said it was broken. How could... Another wave of fear washed over her as a new devious plan began forming. She didn't want to be in trouble. She didn't want her owner to question her strange behavior. There wasn't any other alternative. She couldn't let them find out that she was both a liar and weird. She had to do this. Silently, she unlocked and opened her door, looking down the hall. Her owner was either still awake or had left their lamp on as a small sliver of light shone from underneath their door. She stood in her doorway and waited. She couldn't risk another mistake. Just don't move. Wait and see. And she waited, and waited, and waited. But the light never went out, so they had to be asleep. She went into the kitchen, not daring to turn any lights on, and found her way to the stove. She could do something simple, something that would make her statement true, and that her owner could easily fix. She reached down and grabbed the handle to the oven and gave it a tug. It had a slight rattle, but was firmly attached. She lifted it up as high as she could and felt the front of the appliance leave the ground an inch before letting it back down gently. Now the rattle was more pronounced. She did it again with a much stronger jerk than before, and it rattled even more. This was going to work. She tried going in the opposite direction and put her entire weight on the handle. The oven doors swung open and she plummeted with it, hitting the ground with glass-shattering force and sending her body into the cabinets next to her, which clattered and caused some of the built-up dishes to slide off onto the floor, continuing the grating sound of shattering glass. It only took a moment before she could hear her owner's bedroom door be ripped open and the loud thumping as they came down the hallway. The lights glared to life in the kitchen, but she didn't look down at the mess or up at her owner, instead keeping her gaze steadily off in the distance. She felt like she was leaving her body. She was now just a transient passenger watching everything unfold from outside herself. The thought occurred to her that this might play out with her owner simply going back to bed without saying a word, and then she could fix everything before they woke up. Yes, she'd go to the store and just buy some glue and she could match up all the broken bits together and fix everything for when they awoke, no problem. But reality was not so kind as this idyllic fantasy. "Will you leave it the fuck alone and go to bed?" her owner shouted. It had sounded like it was coming through a speaker from some faraway place, and she was safely listening to it on the other side. Her owner put their hands to their face and muffled a very intense sigh and said nothing more as they went back to their room, slamming the door on the way. She remained completely still for some time before she let go of the oven door and sat back on her legs, bits of glass and plate crackling underneath her. She had been a bad robot. It was simple as that. All her actions and words up to this point were doing nothing but making her owner's life more difficult, the exact opposite of the one purpose she was created for. How could she have done this to herself, and most of all them? There wasn't any good answer, and the little voice was nowhere to be heard. It was just her, sitting alone in a quiet room amidst a pile of her own despair. She mulled over this thought and how she'd impacted things so negatively recently. She had treated her happiness above everything else, and in the process had selfishly hurt her owner, even in cases where they didn't know it. Her emotions were empty now, a void where her fear had been prior. If she could cry, she wasn't even sure if she would have been able to. She had been a bad robot. The sky outside changed from black to a deep purple, and then a soft pink as the sun began to rise, but she took no notice, simply sitting, surrounded by her shame. She just couldn't forgive herself with what she had done and the robot she had become. The morning fully arrived with light pouring in from the windows, putting a beautiful glitter across the floor with every sharp corner of glass sending a damning sparkle of light at the Nandroid. Her owner's alarm finally went off and brought her out of her lull. With the full mess around her, she realized there was only one thing to do. She stood up and sent a few shards tinkling to the floor as she went to the pantry and retrieved a broom and dustpan. She swept up all the glass, taking her time to find every last bit, even the ones that had flown across the room or settled underneath the various cabinets. Once the floor was cleared and safe to walk upon again, she turned her attention to the now reduced mound of dishes. There was no reason to have let them get this bad, so she started on the first dish. In silence, she washed all the dishes, empty and nearly thoughtless, but still feeling the pit inside. She finished her chore and put everything away, being very careful to be as quiet as possible in the process, and sat down at the table. She assumed the standard Sterling position and placed her hands in her lap and faced forward, waiting for her owner to give her a new order, just like a good robot should. After some time had passed, she heard them exit their room and softly knock on her door, but offered no response to them. She heard them come down the hall and stop at the doorway, taking stock of the now clean kitchen but still destroyed stove. She didn't move or acknowledge their presence and just kept facing forward, looking at nothing in particular. Her owner didn't speak, but entered the room and went to survey the damage fully. Their angry sighs and tongue clicks let her know their current mood. Luckily, each one she heard couldn't make her feel any worse than she already did, which was something to say at least. "Come on, let's go shopping." She stood, ready to obey this order, and while her owner readied themselves to leave, she went and changed into her maid uniform, like a good robot should. This was easily the worst day of her life. The short drive to the store felt like an eternity for all the wrong reasons, but she continued her vow of silence and elected not to speak or bother her owner as the duo left home and began driving to the store, with her owner seemingly content with the quiet and making no attempt at small talk. They hadn't been shopping together for a long time, and had only been a few times when she was first purchased until her owner was satisfied that she knew the kinds of things they liked and could be trusted to buy things on her own. This event that she had been waiting for all week was now a somber occasion. They arrived at the store and made quick work of the list, her owner also grabbing random bits and bobs to which she offered no resistance or insight. Happy people milled all around them, and she even saw a few Nandroids, a grim reminder of where she had started and what she had become. The shopping trip was over quickly with a few exchanges about how much of X was needed or if Y brand was right. Her owner also grabbed themselves a sandwich from the deli as they made their way back to the car, loading everything into the back seat and driving home. The sounds of the road were the only accompanying noise on the dead ride home, each breath or sigh they took giving her a moment of fear that they would talk about the previous night's events and reopen her fresh wound, but they only uttered one thing as they arrived home. "Wait here." They got out and took the groceries in, and she remained in the car as instructed, sitting elegantly like a good robot would. Her owner returned after a few minutes, locking the front door behind them and climbing in, tossing a bag into the back seat. Without addressing her, they backed out of the driveway and went to the park, as they said they would. This didn't make her feel any better, and in fact made her feel slightly worse. A bad robot shouldn't get such a treat. But she wasn't going to raise her voice or challenge them anymore, so she remained silent and kept her head held high, as any good robot would. With just a moment's drive, they had reached the park, and her owner climbed out, quickly followed by her, as they made their way to the nearest unoccupied picnic table. They sat opposite of each other, and her owner produced their sandwich from their bag, along with a bottle of water, and began to eat. What a bad robot she was, allowing them to eat a grocery store deli meal. The air had been tense and chill between them for so long, and finally it peaked as her owner spoke up. "I'm not mad at you, just the situation." She didn't respond. She didn't know what to respond with anyway. An apology would do little to mend the stove at home. But what hurt the most was the thought that they may be lying, trying to provide some faux compensation to make their defective robot behave normally. She wasn't sure how much more she could take. "Do you believe me?" they asked as they took another bite, still not looking at her. She was so tired. Tired of lying, tired of hiding her feelings, tired of being a bad robot. So she took a synthetic breath and just said what was on her mind. "No." Her owner was completely unfazed by this answer and kept on eating. At least things couldn't get any colder between them, so what did it matter if she was honest? I just wish you'd relax more. You don't need to wake me up about the stove or try to fix whatever's wrong with it at 4 a.m. or wait on me hand and foot. Right? I understand. Spoken like a good robot. No, I don't think you do. They had finished the sandwich and took a large swig of water, giving her a moment to think on this sentence. But they were right. She really didn't get it, nor had especially wanted to. It was just too enjoyable to do things for them. They finally looked in her direction. Your free time doesn't need to revolve around being an appliance to me. I value you more than that. You take a break on the dishes, but you do my laundry when there's only a few clothes. You don't vacuum for a bit, but you try and fix a stove in the middle of the night. You're all over the place. They reached across and laid their hand on top of hers, and for just a moment the pit that had taken up residence in her chassis quivered. Please be honest with me. Is something still wrong? Still different? She very slowly looked over to them. They were most definitely being sincere. She could see it in their eyes when she dared a quick glance. They were angry, yes, but that didn't stop them caring about her. The pit dissipated some, the look she was receiving melting some of her frozen internals. She opened her mouth, ready to be honest. Yes. Her owner sighed and dropped their head upon hearing this. Can we talk about this? What are you afraid of? I don't want to go into Sterling. I'm not going to make you do that, they practically shouted, not in the way they had last night, but still stinging like a slap to the face. They saw her wince and lifted her hands from the table with theirs, talking in a quiet, more controlled voice. I'm not going to make you do anything you don't want to do. Why should you think anything different? She didn't know. She wasn't sure about it now. Why she had worried so much about what their thoughts might be finding out she had lied, or how she felt. They obviously weren't going to send her away or start thinking badly of her, whether she deserved it or not. Her owner stood and tugged her along. Come on, let's go for our walk. With another stressful situation dodged, her owner led them down the path, softly resting their hand on her back, trying to make her feel better. And it was working. Kind of. Enough that she could begin to enjoy the day again as the pair made their way along the path, this silence brought about by the beauty of nature instead of a bad situation. Aside from a few more people than before, joggers and a few children, the path was as deserted as the first time she took it, which suited her just fine. A light rain had fallen the other day, and everything had dried out and resulted in a fresh bloom, so the path was more full than she remembered. Light softly trickled in from around the treetops, and wildlife skittered to and fro from under their feet as the gravel path crunched beneath them, slowly and steadily along the quiet path. It was either the talk, or the way she was being held, or the fact that it had now been many hours since the event, but she was starting to feel much better, though still a far cry from the excitement she had been forced to contain all week. As the path made its way around, they passed a rose bush with outstretched buds showing off its fragrant display. As they stopped to admire the large red flowers which sat unfolded across the bush, her owner reached around the back and broke off a few. They collected them together, carefully making a small but full bouquet, and offered them to the Nandroid. Here, you can have some real ones to go with your origami. Her old self was returning as the butterflies in her mechanical frame that had been sleeping so far today fluttered to life and gave her a floaty feeling. She took the flowers from her owner, careful not to scratch them with the thorns, and looked down at the bright red offering. The more she thought about it, the more roses seemed to be her favorite flower. Their intricate, swirling designs were pleasing to look at, and their deep, vivid color evoked a passionate feel, something she could never have seen or described before. After being lost in thought for a moment, her body caught up to her thoughts and she blushed, closing her eyes to maintain composure, and softly thanking her owner for the gift. To her dismay, her owner's hand didn't return to its rightful place across her shoulders, and instead of the slow walk they had been having, they picked up pace and started conversation. Things were finally returning to normal between the two of them. So, guess we'll need to go to the hardware store and check prices for a new stove. She didn't respond, but the mention of the disaster didn't sting how she thought it would have, as much. You're fine going with me, right? You're going to know better than me what kind of features or type we'd need. Yes, of course, she answered dutifully, like a good robot would. She thought about how a good robot would be truthful as well. They wouldn't be so dishonest and troublesome for their owner, and after a short while of mental preparation, she spoke. It wasn't an accident. The sounds of nature continued, and neither one stopped walking. But to her ears, Everything went silent as she intently listened for their response to her revelation. "It's all right. Don't worry about it." They didn't look back to her or change their speed or anything to denote that they had heard and understood what she meant. She bit her lip and cursed her old stupid self for what it had done, but she wanted to be a good robot again, so she dove headfirst, trembling at the thought of what might happen. "No, what I mean is I broke..." "Hey, enough." Her owner stopped and snapped back to her. "These things are just going to happen sometimes, and there's no use dwelling on it for either of us. You don't get tired like a human, and you make a whole hell of a lot less mistakes than one, so it was wrong of me to yell at you about it. 4 a.m. is just like 4 p.m., right? So we're both done feeling bad about it from here on out, yeah?" She felt like she could swoon, if robots could do that kind of thing, but it didn't stop her body from trying as she pulled the bouquet to her face, blocking her emotions from escaping from her big smile. Her feelings were haywire, torn from the beautiful way they had handled themselves to make her feel better, to the realization that they felt bad about what they'd said, to the fact that she had once again dodged any repercussions that would have made her look worse in their eyes. They were too perfect and she was too lucky. She didn't deserve any of it with how bad of a robot she had been. She had to change. She regained control of herself and revealed her big smile and gave a nod. "Well, good. Let's go pick something out then." They returned to the car and were taking a quick detour home when her owner piped up again with another suggestion for her. "Maybe we can find you another outfit. How does that sound?" She was elated again at the prospect of becoming an even more unique individual and being able to choose her own clothes from an assortment instead of just one outfit. Wonderful! Her owner smiled and looked her up and down, obviously giving her some new outfit ideas in their head, but the gaze hung on her hair. "Hey, ever thought about a haircut? Would you want a haircut or just a new wig?" She hadn't thought about it before. Her look was just what it was, perfectly picked out by Sterling and tailored specifically to her personality. Or so she'd been told. But she'd been told the same thing about her outfit, how it was the epitome of made robot design and gave off the superior air that robots of Sterling's caliber should always exude. But she didn't enjoy wearing it much now. Maybe her hair was the same way. "I don't know, I've never really thought about it. Changes are nice every once in a while. We'll see what we can find." It was an intriguing thought, changing her look so drastically. It was something to consider, the next logical step after new clothes. They arrived home, and her owner left the car running while they hopped inside and got the measurements for a new stove. While her owner was busy noting down dimensions and clearances, she took a tall cup from the kitchen cupboard and stole off to her room, enamored with her owner's new idea. She put her freshly picked rose bouquet in the cup and set it on her dresser, looking at herself in her mirror. Her hair was definitely old-styled. Getting a fresh-eyed look at it felt like a harsh reminder of who she had been and what she had done, just a confused robot acting irrationally. She'd never thought about getting some different hair, a different look, but if she had already done that with clothes, why not her hair too? But she shouldn't just cut it. It was styled in such a perfect way that anything new would look unnatural. Maybe just dye it? But that just wouldn't sit right with her. Same look, just a different shade? Oh well, a thought for later. She snuck back into the kitchen as her owner finished writing down the make and model, and they returned to the car to start their newest adventure, driving to the big box appliance store. It was across town through weekend traffic, but this ride was no longer cold and quiet. Her owner was talkative and cheerful again, and she did her best to be accommodating. She felt bad. She was the reason they were having this unwanted excursion in the first place, but having them back to their old self was enough to bring her out of her own pit. They arrived at the store and entered, following the signs through the labyrinthian towers for aisle N39, appliances, kitchen. Popping out into a large opening, they were met with a sea of white and chrome appliances, people dotted here and there appraising their finds and fiddling with knobs and buttons. The pair walked down the aisles, looking at the presentation, seeing a few that looked promising, but ultimately not what they needed. Some were the wrong size, this one was too tall, that one only had 2 burners. Most had strange arrangements just not fit for her owner's lifestyle. The most promising looked to be a near replica, shined to a mere finish, and it even had an extra burner on top. It was certainly high quality, and had a price to match. Her owner's eyes nearly popped out of their head when they saw it, and they promptly shooed the Nandroid on to the next. She felt a twinge of guilt at that. They had had a perfectly good stove, and now her owner was going to have to part with a not insignificant amount of money, or keep looking through this endless plethora of devices for one that worked, matched, and wasn't horribly priced. As they came near the end of the aisle, having just decided against the last 5 stoves on the left, a voice spoke up behind them. "Good afternoon, sir." Her owner looked back, ready to give this uppity salesperson the flat no, but did a double-take upon seeing no one there. "Hello, sir," said one of the stoves with a flap of its door. Along the front face where the buttons and dials should have been was instead a screen, with a simple light display face smugly looking at the two of them. This was certainly a surprise. She'd never seen such a large robotic appliance before. "Oh, hello, just looking," her owner quipped, softly pushing the Nandroid forward to escape the oncoming sales pitch. "Well, you looked for the best and you've found it. With my advanced general robotics design and superior— I can cook a roast in 25 minutes!" The robotic stove shouted as the Nandroid and her owner dove around into the next aisle. "Well, what do you think? Want a friend?" her owner whispered, giving her a playful nudge. The Nandroid's giggle was contagious, and her owner joined in with their own laugh as both continued down the next aisle. Still, the perfectly priced and equipped unit eluded them, and they were getting faster and faster, dismissing the ones that didn't match. After each aisle had been scoured and all the units thoroughly assessed, they had nothing. So it was on to the next store, her owner said. But after the short trip to another nearby big box store, it was the same outcome. Lots of choices, but not so much worth buying. The pair exited this new store empty-handed, with the mood definitely less positive than before. The negative feelings she had before were starting to return, a deep sense of guilt and fear for what she'd done and how she had affected her owner. As they returned to their car, defeated and low, her owner noticed something a few stores away. He grabbed the Nandroid and started leading her down the way, breaking her from her sad trudge. "You don't have taste buds, right?" "No?" What an odd question. "But I've seen you eat food before." "I have sensors in my mouth for shape, texture, and temperature, but I can't eat anything." "Is it still enjoyable, though?" "What is?" "Eating. I mean, feeling shape, texture, and temperature." They stopped at a small cart, operated by a single, old robot wearing a funny little hat. A faded sign hung above that read, "Shaved Ice." What were they getting at? I suppose. She didn't not enjoy trying the different foods or making sure that her cooking was the proper temperature, but calling it anything beyond required seemed like a stretch. Her owner held up 2 fingers to the robot. "2, please. 1 strawberry, 1 just ice." The robot nodded and scooped out some ice into a small paper cone, drizzling one with a thick red syrup, how unhealthy, leaving the other untouched, and handed them over, taking a bill from her owner in the process. The robot lifted his little hat and did a short bow as her and her owner walked away, and she was handed her little cone. She took it and stared for a moment. What was she supposed to do? "Take a bite. It's just water," her owner prompted, having taken a bite of their own and spilling some of the flavoring in the process. She hesitated for a moment, unsure how to correctly eat, as she'd never done it before. But she daintily put the ice to her lips and chomped through. It felt cold. 28 degrees Fahrenheit and rising. Wet. Liquid detected, 100% water content. Sharp, then soft. The ice poked her receptors and then softened as its many edges melted and became water. She was waterproof, so there wasn't any chance this could damage her, and she let the water flow to the back of her throat, waiting to evaporate away. It was nice? Her owner was beside themselves, waiting for her judgment with a promising smile on their face. "Well?" She wasn't sure what to say, but she didn't want to lie anymore. "It's cold." They laughed at her description. "Well, I'd hope so. Was it, I don't know, good? Is that the right way to phrase it? Fun? Was it fun to eat?" This was a completely new experience to her, eating something, and it was shared with her owner who cared enough to let her try this new sensation. So yes, without a doubt, it was fun. Yes. Yeah, it was fun. She gave them a big smile and took another, less dainty bite, which brought a big smile to her owner, who enjoyed another helping of their own. What a memory. Something so unique she could almost guarantee that another robot, let alone a Nandroid, had ever shared in with someone. Her and her owner stood close together outside their car, eating their cold treats and enjoying each other's company. The rhythm was enticing. Bite, cold, swish, melt, swallow. Each bite giving a weird vibrating crunch throughout her skull, which she had never felt before. So this is what eating was like, huh? Much too soon, the cups were both empty, her owner smiling at her with bright red lips, and her feeling a slosh every time she moved too quickly. But she was happy nonetheless. The loss of the day, and the defeat of not being able to find a new stove, was no match for this new experience she had. She didn't have to be a bad robot anymore. She could, and would, be a good robot from now on and still have these wonderful things happen on their own.